It's not about the wins. It's about the pressure to win.
I faced it all, I stood tall. I did it.
I had the great honor and privilege of playing Mark Kerr.
He was the most terrifying man in a cage. Undefeated, unstoppable, untouchable. But the fight that destroyed him never took place under the lights. Mark Kerr wasn't just a fighter. He was a force, a colossus in the early days of mixed martial arts, where rules were scarce and brutality reigned. His nickname, the Smashing Machine, wasn't branding, it was prophecy. Bones cracked beneath him, faces shattered, crowds roared, and he kept winning again and again. But behind the myth, there was something else, something darker, because while the world saw a monster built for violence, Mark Kerr was quietly unraveling, injecting painkillers to stay conscious, popping pills between matches, losing himself in a fog of addiction, doubt, and dependency. His collapse wasn't sudden. It was slow, silent, and suffocating. The question was never whether Mark Kerr could beat anyone. The question was, why did he need to be someone else just to step into the ring? Focused and obsessed with winning, he wasn't born into chaos. He earned his place in it. A standout athlete in high school, a Division I NCAA champion at Syracuse, an Olympic hopeful. His life was ruled by structure, by sweat, by an unbreakable will. But wrestling wasn't enough. In the late 1990s, as the underground world of no-holds-barred fighting began to surge, Kerr saw an opening. The Ultimate Fighting Championship had arrived, raw, violent, and unregulated. It wasn't just sport, it was spectacle. And for someone like Mark, it was freedom. He entered the cage with little fanfare and exited a legend. He was too big, too fast, too technical. He didn't just beat people, he broke them. Arms, ribs, faces, all in the name of dominance. His opponents weren't just outmatched, they were terrified. And fans loved it. Soon, Pride Fighting Championships in Japan came calling. The stakes were bigger, the crowds, massive. And the rules? Even looser. Kerr became an international star. The money rolled in. So did the pressure, the expectations, the injuries, and the pain. That's when the pills started. Painkillers to numb the damage. Downers to ease the adrenaline. Sleep aids to recover from nights that never really ended. He was winning on paper, but inside, something was breaking. His personal life began to spiral. Relationships fractured. Paranoia grew. Cameras followed him in HBO's documentary, The Smashing Machine, expecting to capture the rise of a monster. But what they found was something far more disturbing. A man using violence to outrun his own reflection. Mark wasn't just fighting opponents. He was fighting reality. Fighting the fear that without the chaos, without the pain, without the roar of the crowd, he was nothing. And so he kept walking into the cage, not because he loved it, but because it was the only place where everything else went quiet. For a time, Mark Kerr was untouchable. He racked up wins across continents, collecting belts, paychecks, and bruises he didn't feel until days later, if at all. He looked invincible, but the illusion was paper-thin, held together by needles, pills, and sheer willpower. Behind every fight was a lie. That he was fine, that the pain wasn't real, that he could stop whenever he wanted. But he couldn't. The same body that crushed opponents was falling apart. Torn ligaments, damaged nerves, sleep that never came without pills. The fear of being replaced, forgotten, outclassed, it didn't go away after a victory. In fact, it got louder. And the more he won, the more he had to pretend the monster was still in control. Meanwhile, his personal life was imploding. His relationship with his girlfriend, Dawn Staples, became a battleground of its own. Addiction turned love into volatility. There were shouting matches. There were breakdowns. There were moments where neither of them knew which version of Mark they'd get that day. The charming champion, or the man sinking beneath chemical fog. Even his friendships in the sport began to fracture. Mark Coleman, a fellow MMA legend and longtime friend, watched Kerr spiral but couldn't stop it. No one could. The people around him had seen what made him a star, but now they were watching what would unmake him. And yet, he kept fighting. Not because he loved the sport anymore, but because he didn't know who he was without it. The cage, as brutal as it was, gave him identity. The violence gave him clarity. It was the only place where the expectations stopped. The only place where silence could finally fall. Until one day, even the cage wasn't enough. The losses started. The reflexes slowed. The monster was tired, and the man inside had nothing left to hide behind. The smashing machine wasn't smashing anymore. He was breaking, and this time everyone could see it. The truth was never in the win-loss record. It was buried underneath the bruises, hidden between the rounds, and swallowed with every pill Mark Kerr took just to keep moving. He wasn't fighting opponents anymore, he was fighting reality. The painkillers weren't just for recovery, they were for existence. Morphine, Demerol, sleep aids, tranquilizers. If his body didn't ache, his mind did. If the crowd wasn't screaming, the silence in his head was deafening. Behind closed doors, he was unraveling. The HBO documentary showed it all. Not a champion rising, but a man slipping. He was supposed to be a machine, but machines don't cry in front of cameras. Machines don't whisper apologies to girlfriends in the hallway. Machines don't stare into bathroom mirrors and wonder if the version in the reflection is still human. The world called him indestructible. But strength was never his problem, honesty was. Because in the fight game, admitting weakness is worse than defeat. So he smiled. He nodded. He said, "I'm fine." And everyone believed him until they couldn't. The darkest truth wasn't the addiction. It was what he used it to hide. A man who only felt real when people feared him, and nothing at all when they didn't. At Hidden Fame, we see Mark Kerr not as a failed fighter, but as a mirror reflecting the cost of turning pain into performance. His story isn't just about addiction or violence. It's about how easily we applaud destruction when it's entertaining. Kerr didn't choose to be the smashing machine. That identity was assigned, applauded, and monetized until the machine broke, and no one wanted to look at what was left behind. We've built a culture that celebrates invincibility but punishes vulnerability. A man like Kerr was never allowed to say, "I'm not okay." He could bleed. He could bruise. He could inject morphine into his thigh mid-tournament. But the moment he asked for help, the illusion would crack, and so he stayed silent. The fight world cheered his dominance and ignored his collapse. But so did we, viewers, fans, media. We consumed his pain like it was pay-per-view content, forgetting that behind the muscles and violence was a person, aching to be seen without the armor. Mark Kerr's tragedy isn't that he lost fights. It's that he was never taught how to live without them. And maybe that's the part no one wants to admit, that we don't just create champions. We create monsters, and then we look away when they self-destruct. There was a time when Mark Kerr didn't need painkillers or applause to feel whole. Just a wrestling mat, a coach's voice, and the clarity that came with knowing who you were. A competitor, a student, a man chasing gold, not ghosts. Back then, victories didn't require violence. And being the best didn't mean destroying yourself to prove it. But that world faded. And in its place came stadium lights, blood-stained mats, and the roar of strangers calling him a machine, as if that title could erase the man underneath. As if the pain made him more heroic. But even machines break. In later years, Mark Kerr stepped away from the cage. He entered recovery. He tried to rebuild. And maybe, quietly, he realized what fighting never gave him. Peace. He isn't the myth anymore. He's just a man. Still here, still healing. And maybe that's the real victory no one talks about. Some stories were never meant to be known. But now,